Thank you for making the sacrifice to come to the show. We're gonna go right through it. Everybody have seen the video. The video of the murder of George Floyd. Even though there's been other crime, but we're gonna focus on that because this has been a very unique event that people watch 8 minutes of the police officer choking George Floyd. Now, Richard, I'm going to start with you. As a police officer, certainly you've had a great career with the St. Pete PD for all this time. So when you watched that video, what was your initial reaction to this? Obviously, this was unusual to everyone. So I just want to see your take and how that could be possible, really, for a police officer to do to another human being.
Well, that video was just shocking. That's the best description that I can come up with. Just shocking to sit there and watch for 8 minutes and 46 seconds. Watch uh, a public servant whose duty is to protect and serve and save life for 8 minutes and 46 seconds take another man's life away. Shocking.
Mm-hmm.
And not at all what's supposed to happen or how it's supposed to happen. Just to watch as people plea for that the man is dying to save him. Uh, and you're absolutely right. I think that video, as bad as it was, is now playing a major part into necessary changes that need to happen. And I think we're watching it unfold. And George Floyd and his demise, I think, is his death now is gonna play a major part in effecting changes that should have happened, that needs to happen, and I believe will happen.
Okay. So, Attorney Ricardo, what's your take on this? What was your reactions? And certainly, why don't you start from there, and then we'll talk about the sequence of event that led to this to the officer being charged.
Well, when I first saw the video, normally I try not to watch these videos because of my personality. I tend to be very sensitive to certain things. Um, and also, I like to look at the totality of the circumstance in a legal perspective, which means I need to see different angle, different things, especially the facts to make sure that I was watching something different. But for this video, the first thing that I can see from what Officer Richard just said, I was sitting, I'm like, oh my God, this guy is committing a first degree murder real time, and then he's really proud of it when I look at it. And the reason why I'm saying that is because a lot of people will say, well, they call him into the scene and they were not really planning on doing that. How would you say this is first degree murder? Because you need premeditation and intent to commit that. But for first degree murder, really, premeditation and deliberation must be proven. This does not mean that a specific amount of time must be involved in the planning. All that is needed is enough time to consciously form a plan to commit the act and the intent to kill, while also having enough time for a reasonable person to stop themselves from committing such an act. With that being said, the officer talked about 8 minutes. I mean, people were screaming, people were yelling and said, okay, and the man is yelling, I can't breathe myself. And then you see this guy say, no, it doesn't matter to me because I'm here to kill you. Okay, this is not just depraved heart or reckless or negligence, which fall under the category of second degree murder or third degree murder, or like crime of passions and stuff like that. This is a crime that was where premeditation and intent at the time the crime is being committed. That's my rationale of it.
Okay. Okay. Well, for me, as a physician, I'm looking at this. It matters how you. I guess you you kill somebody, but this particular way of killing, that really, really touch a chord and a nerve. Now, I saw as a layperson looking at this, I said, wow, this looked like a slam dunk. Okay, but it took at least almost a week, even after the process, the protests started, for the police department to come with different level of. I mean, you thought initially that it should be charged with first degree,
Yeah.
but I know the difficulty about proving intent. But so they charge him with second degree after so many deliberations. And is that the way those things are processed in the police?
Well, I mean, the key. I think I respect the choice the prosecutors make in the sense to at least charge with a second degree murder, which based on depraved heart, and you don't have to get bogged down into the issues of intent. Especially for police officers as well. I mean, based on the history of other cases, even with the one with Zimmerman and everything, we know that happened in Florida. So prosecutors are becoming a little bit smarter about it and try to be a little bit more reasonable in their approach. Because second degree murder, I think in Minnesota, Pennsylvania, and Florida kind of have the same type of laws with respect to criminal degrees and criminal degrees of murder, to say it this way. So, and I think second degree murder comes with like 25 years, if I recall, in Minnesota. So, yeah, I get it. I get why the prosecutor will come in. But me, I'm not a criminal lawyer, but we all had to do criminal laws the first year of law school. Any reasonable person, any lay person, like you put it earlier, can see clearly what was done here. I mean, it's just elementary, basic.
I imagine that's why the public was so incensed, because they see that. I mean, it's obvious, but I understand that. Now, Richard, the thing about the police, how they discipline their officers, this guy's had 18 complaints over the last, 16, 17 years. He was only disciplined with 2. So talk about a little bit how the discipline take place and what the complexity of those issues which make it so difficult to discipline the officers.
Well, I think police departments, it depends on how progressive leadership is a lot of times. I think there is an understanding that any officer who goes out every day and do his or her job, you're gonna get a certain level of complaints because sometimes people just don't want to get arrested, and then they'll find something and they'll complain. And we understand that. When I worked as a supervisor, that came very clear that the officer did what he was supposed to do, and that the complaint may have been frivolous. However, I would say when someone, you can watch the officer, you can watch the type of complaints that are coming in, and then you can begin to create. I mean, in your mind, you can say, "Well, wait a minute. There's a level of consistency in these complaints that perhaps we need to take a closer look." 18 complaints is high, for in a lot of instances, but each department handle these differently. It depends who the police chief is, who the sheriff is, and unfortunately where in the country that agency is located.
Okay, so political issue, geographic issue.
Hmm.
Now, let's talk briefly about Richard Brooke. How was this handled differently than what's the difference between that and George Floyd, besides the gruesomeness of the murder of George Floyd? To me, when I look at the film, I call it a public execution.
Which one, for Floyd or
no, for
for
Richard,
Brooks?
for Brooke.
For Brooks.
Yeah.
Well, I think what happened is in the Floyd case, the initial charge was third degree murder,
Yeah.
and then it got moved up to second degree murder. And I think right now we are at a time in this country, I mean, law enforcement is in the spotlight, and it's pretty bright. So then for the Books incident to happen, now keep in mind now the officers in Minnesota were fired like right away, as also was the case in Atlanta. But the difference is you've got a prosecutor who was much more aggressive in pursuing justice for the family, and so you saw those charges came in rather quickly, and he charged for whatever the law allowed him to charge. He was not trying to minimize any of the charges, so that was pretty swift in comparison to what historically has happened in this country.
So, Ricardo, I mean, you look at those murders, and then previous murder that have been, unnoticed because there was no video camera and stuff like that. Is this just racism, or are there more factors involved in this?
Well, to be honest with you, me, the way, like I said, I look at the totality of the circumstance. I look at everything that's going on. And this is something I've been looking at for a while. What I think is happening in this country, people don't even realize it, or maybe we're so caught up into our own self, or become desensitized, or become so selfish with our own little life. We don't even realize we have a humanitarian crisis in this country. It's been around for a while with respect to Black men in other communities as well. And that humanitarian crisis evolves. It becomes flesh, and now the flesh is rotten. This is what you are smelling now on the street. What do I mean by that? You see, there's systematic corruption. Systematic corruption comes in different reasons, and they're established for a purpose, for a reason. Everybody's comfortable in it. What do I mean by that? If you have to look at yourself. You have to ask those questions. Why? Where? What? When? You always have to ask the questions. Why? This is the most popular one to ask. If you look at the way police officers, and Officer Richard said something that is key, regions, politics and all those other things, all that was so part because politicians, have a lot to. I won't get into that politics things here because it's too heavy. But let me say this. If you look at the unions in New York, for instance, New York is mostly like a liberal state, right? And you got liberal mayors, there are these liberal stuff, all kind of things over there. You would think that, the system there liberals always like somehow claim to be with the people, helping the people, it's about the people, things like that. What I'm trying to say. You say, okay, well, the police stations in New York, we got to see this reflecting there. But when you look at other chokehold, I forgot the gentleman that died. There was that, and you look at the way the union blocks reform over and over when it comes to police brutality and corruptions, code of silence, all sort of things. Then you start asking yourself, maybe it goes beyond politics. Maybe it goes beyond GOPs or Democrats or whatever. Maybe there's some other forces behind it. Then you start asking your questions. Okay, some police stations, some police places have like quotas. How many tickets you give for the month? I'm told. I don't know if it's true, but Officer Richard can help me there. How many arrests you make for the month? And then you ask yourself, why? Why the police officers, civil servants supposed to have the quotas on their head? Then you jump into private prisons. Because if you have private prisons, you got to feed them. How are you going to feed them? Because it's a business. If it's a business, you got to feed them. Then you got to have product. Who's the product? People. Okay? So now you have those incentives. When you have incentive in place that are bad incentive, they are going to create systematic corruptions. Okay? So that's me trying to give you an idea. It goes deeper than that, of the systematic corruptions that causing us now to smell the rotten flesh. We're smelling. So,
Officer Richard, you were on patrol as well as you did some community policing as well. So when you're on patrol, for instance, when an officer's out there on patrol, are they assigned to a specific region to rotate? Because imagine, if they assign you to, say, the Black community, you have a sensitivity for the people, you understand them. There's some cultural approximation, so to speak. Whereas a white officer go into a neighborhood, a black neighborhood, there'd probably be some tension already, just because. So what's your experience with this? Can you comment on this?
Well, good question. Very good question, actually. I mean, look, to go back in your previous question that Ricardo kind of touched on, I mean, there's systemic racism without question. And when you look at yes, there are laws that need to be changed, but if you look at how laws are applied in one community versus a different community, therein lies your answer.
If a white guy shoot a black man, it's really hard to somehow, because of stand your ground law, to bring charges or even convict a person like that. Whereas if a black person kill a white person, it is highly likely you will be convicted. So as the law applied, this is where as applied come from. And to get that to work, you got to have database. You have to have report. You got to have, all that stuff. How many cases, how many this and that reported before you can bring a suit to determine whether or not this law is constitutional and get it banned under as applied when you apply that standard. But the reason why I try to not get into racism directly into this, which is racism, because if you have standard, like Federal Richard said, you have federal standard, you have certain mechanism within the system, within the law, you remove the corrupted incentives, you're going to make it very hard for the bad person to even be attracted to the police force, the racists to come in to do stuff. But right now, what you have, it's a system that is so lucrative for the corrupt, for the racists, for all the bad things, for the bad apples to come in and wreak havoc on the minorities and creating humanitarian crisis in this country.
Spread like wildfire, and now it's a complete movement. As of today, there's still protests and marches, and so far, it's like whatever reaction happened was totally communal, whatever shared by everybody, because everybody had that same reaction. Enough is enough. So, and Americans are demanding not only big reform, but also wants everybody to recognize that Black life matter. So, you guys, you've had 3 weeks to look at this movement. So, what do you think is going on so far, and what give you, any sign for hope, to be hopeful, to be encouraged?
Well, for me, I think the the biggest thing, the biggest change is the fact now it is the total Rainbow Coalition. Uh, I mean, we've had these types of cases. They've been happening, and Black folks have been protesting. We've been crying, screaming that these things to be made. But all of those have fallen on deaf ears, except with Mr. Floyd. I think that's the critical change. That now white folks, whether you're white, black, whatever the color under the rainbow, people are saying enough is enough, and that changes need to happen. And let me tell you, quite frankly, if in order for that to change, white people have to really want this change to happen.
Within this country, federal law to step in and said enough is enough. And the only way this is going to happen is public policy advocacy, keeping the pressure with the people on the street for these people to know we have gotten enough in this country.
Well, that's a good point. Because to quote, I'm not sure who said that, but he said, while all Black people is good at is to, every time something happened, we just go on the street and protest. To me, I see the difference now is that it's not just Black people are protesting, it's everything, everybody, every color, age group, different. So they might, I'm a little hopeful about this. Now, your point, Ricardo, is really great, because unless there are federal law that are applicable to everybody, then those changes not going to be permanent or going to be put into practical application. So you see already Congress, the House came up with a bill. Okay, it's called what's the name of the bill? I think it's called the Act of 2020, the Justice Act of 2020, sponsored by this congresswoman from California, and has 200 support. And essentially, it calls for a number of things, which some of the protesting are asking for, such as defund police. So now you could see already the reaction of the politician, the backing up from that, and I'll get your opinion on that. But you have to ban chokehold, to establish a national database to track police misconduct, and prohibit certain no-knock warrant, among other initiatives. So at the same time, the Republican has also a bill sponsored by Tim Scott from South Carolina. Doesn't even come close to this, So there are going to be some pressure. There is going to be some challenges to this. Do you see? Is it the time ready for those two branches of the Congress to unite and come up with a reasonable bill for America?
Well, this is a prime time. It is reasonable. Well, the pressure is on like that. This is the time you keep the pressure on. These politicians, remember, politicians are cunning by nature. And what do I mean by that? Politicians love issues. They ride issues. They run on issues. If there are no issues, they become irrelevant. And that's why they don't want to fix issues sometimes, because these things are good for people on the left, people from the right, and everything. Some issues you think might be good for GOPs, you think it's not good for people on the right, and it's good for them because everybody got an angle from it, and they use it, they run on it. This is why you never got immigration fixed in this country, abortions, whatever, all those controversial issues, because they get to people's emotions, they get you out to vote. This guy's on my side, that person's on your side. This time, we need to keep the pressure on so that people know there's no sides on this one. This is a bipartisan issue. We have a humanitarian crisis in this country, which requires Congress to weigh in, to come in and fix it. This notion that somehow we're just going to be on the street, rioting, do all those other things, it's all good to a certain extent. I'm not talking about rioting or looting. I'm talking about the manifestations in the pressure. But now, while we're doing that, while we keep doing that, because we have to keep making them uncomfortable in a sense where we keep telling them that we have a problem because they don't want to hear it. They want it to go away so that everybody got back to normal. We need to pick up the phone for those of us, especially who can't be on the street. For those of us, for one reason or another, we don't want to be on the street with those protesters, then we need to pick up our phone and call people from our congressmen, women from South Carolina, North Carolina, from Florida, from all those places, to let them know this humanitarian crisis is a bipartisan issue. It's not a Democrat, not a Republican. People have been killing this country. And another thing also, it makes this country look weak, crazy, and unreasonable at the world stage as well. We have no credibility to talk to China, North Korea, or Iran, any other countries where, people have been marginalized, crushed. We have no this point, and we have to fix it, which make it a bipartisan issue. We should be very careful. We don't frame this as if it's like a Democrat thing or Republican. Politicians going to seize on it from both ends, and then we kill the good thing that's supposed to happen from this.
Yeah. So, Officer, do you have a comment on that before I ask you another question?
Yeah, I mean, I think what's been said is true. Some of these antiquated rules need to change. I think one of the big ones, I mean, if we can figure out a way how to unshield officers' liability, that'll be a good law. Because look, right now an officer can do almost anything, and they don't personally. It's difficult to get to an officer. It's kind of like what I'm saying. That would be a big first step, because it will help people think before they act a little bit more. I am defunding the police. one of the things as an officer I always thought about, we respond to so many things. We respond to everything that that I mean we're not really equipped to respond to. And the idea of having uh, more qualified people to respond to someone who's having a mental issue, as long as it's not at a violent stage, I think that's a good thing. We some of those calls that we go to. Listen, I would rather we equip other people to go to those, and then we kind of minimize some of that stuff that officers are needlessly having to go do. So I mean I think that there could be some good in rearranging some funding to make our work, the police work, more efficient.
Talking about
You,
defunding, Dr. Morency, if I may, before you ask your
Mhm.
next questions,
Sure,
let me say
sure.
this real quick. On defunding the police, we have to be very careful with that. I totally agree with what Officer Richard just said about, those, you cannot get police officers to do everything. That's just insanity, really. And it's a recipe for disaster. And you already know when you call an officer to go have some mental illness person, you know the stories how it happened. But here's what I want to say: that yes, we need to defund the police to a certain extent. We need to demilitarize our police forces. We want our police officers to be civil servants, not an invading force coming into your house with their, or whenever they call them, they're just waiting for the next opportunity to just boom, boom, boom. And what do I mean by that? The money we allocate for rubber bullets, the gas, the tanks, you see those vehicles, the tanks, we don't need all that. Okay, we need that money to go in the neighborhood of those victims by our police forces and spend the money on their children so that they don't become next victim. We need to get the counties, the cities need to start allocating part of that money to those neighborhoods. The same people the private prisons have been using as bait for years. We need to do that. At the same time, we need to maintain good salaries for police officers. Their 401ks, their retirement. Because if you don't do that, then you're going to create another problem. Next thing you know, you're going to have police officers going to this guy's shop, stopping to buy my shop and pick. Hey, this month you have to pay. Like we see in some world countries where police officers become a mafia club and then they go to the stores, the boutique, and get money from business owners directly. We don't want that. So we need to give them enough money. But we give them too much money, it's a recipe for disaster. And also for qualified immunity, like Officer Richard was talking about, we need to rein in on this thing and cut it off, because these things create corruptions, they create systematic racism, as you can see, and it becomes like a breeding room for all bad people to and coming into the police force just to do their own thing. We have to be conscious of these things. So too much money there, it's a problem. But we have to be very surgical how we defund the police, because we need civil servants to protect our neighborhood, to protect us, and we need to create this relationship in the community. And another thing there need to be a campaign of education that police officers, black people are not your enemies. And black people, police officers are not your enemies. We need to evolve from where we are now, the trainings. I don't know how long a police officer can get to train in the United States. 21 weeks, maybe Officer Richard can elaborate on that. That's just crazy. You cannot have a police officers who are going to deal with all sort of people out there, pastors, priests, the shop owner, the gardener, the farm workers, and then you give them only 21 weeks of trainings to go deal with all sort of things in the community. We need to spend money on training these people properly, give them humanity classes, ethics, all kind of stuff that will make them better civil servant, and then they will understand they get paid because we pay them to protect us. That's part of the social contract. It's not the other way around. We don't pay police officers to kill us. We pay taxes. We do everything so that they can protect us. That's the way we're supposed to do. Okay.
I would say that there's a line that I think society has to find that balance. Uh, that the police can be effective. Look, some of those equipment are necessary. You know, it's we know there's a gun problem in this country, and I sure don't want to respond to somebody's house who has an AR-15, and all I've got is my handgun. That is not an equal fight. So we got to meet people where they are. So taking those away, it's going to be difficult. At the same time too, uh, don't think about some of that militarized equipment as just we're going to do bad stuff. If a hurricane come through, we need some of that equipment to be able to go save people. So there's a balance that I think as we work through this in each community, we'll have to figure that part out because some of the stuff that affect us in Florida may not affect people in, I don't know, some other state somewhere. So there's a balance. We need to find it, but some of that equipment is the police need to have it. Uh, but yeah, so go ahead, Eve.
So I think we talked about this briefly on a private conversation, but was there a point that the police was doing just police, safety and protect folks, not engage in all those other activity that they've been doing? I mean, I know from what I've read that some of the militarization occur after 9/11. And so all the leftover equipment the military had, they pass it on to the local police. So was there a time where we can go
Well,
back to that time, or is it more
as
complicated?
when the whole idea of policing, uh, as you study through community policing way back in England, Sir Robert Peel writes that it, the community got to the point where they go, okay, all right, if we have because they could. That was in its simplest forms. Now, those officers were members of that community, which means they too lived in that community. They too knew pretty much all the people who live in that community. And so they were able to help them solve problems. And typically, your police officers were those people who maybe didn't have the fear, uh, who could meet if there was some strong guy who was just taking stuff from other people. You needed people to be able to deal with those. As communities evolve, things became more and more complex. Then police also had to adjust. That's the last time I think police. You understand what I'm saying? To go to your question, uh, only with stuff like that. But that whole militarization thing, that progressed as society advanced. The more guns you had, then the more guns police had to have. And I think once those assault rifles uh, got out of control, then yeah, police departments, I mean, the military is always looking to get new stuff. So I'm sure they were more than happy to give their old stuff to police departments across the country, and that's kind of like how the process has evolved. But
So
yeah,
as a
Dr. Morency, I
go ahead.
in part I agree with I understand Officer Wisher's background. I mean, from the police perspective of everything. But if you look at most of the crime committed by the police, usually, I would say it's just a gun. It's not even AR-15, none of that stuff. If you look at, I mean, with respect to black people in this country, manifestations, people are going out there to protest peacefully, and you're seeing those equipment, there's stuff, people coming with a bullet and everything. Right now, there's a country in Europe, I think it's Scotland or something. They just voted to ban U.S. from purchasing, rubber bullet from them because they've seen what we are doing with this stuff here to our own people. So this is where I am. I'm not saying that the police shouldn't have certain unit in it when dealing with some gangs or some stuff. I mean, yes, the police has to be armed, whatever. But I respect that part of it. But what I'm saying is we cannot have a budget where we deprive the citizen, the county, of so much. Like, look at the unions in New York, for God's sake. Okay? You know, these people, you can't even do anything at all to them. I mean, it's like, okay, let me put it this way. We need laws now that will create incentive for good police officers. How about that? If you go somewhere, another police officer is going to kill somebody else, and then a good police officer step in and said, "Hey," like that lady they fired, I think in Chicago or something for doing that. I don't remember that state where she was fired for stepping in and save a citizen life. They fired her because of it. We need laws now for people like her when they step in to create peace, to save a citizen. I mean, a fellow, citizen. We need incentive for that. We need to criminalize the science of the how do you call it again, the code of silence. We need to criminalize all those little things that create corruption. We need the Fed to come in and say, if you're a police officer, you're a civil servant, there are things you can't do. If you're a union and you're police officers, just like we exempt certain federal, unit from unionize from certain things. Well, if you're a police officer, you can unionize with respect to salary, to foreign case, but with respect to law changing how you behave, you can't say anything about it. The people has to decide that. Things like that.
Well, I mean, I'll tell you. I mean, I've been able to go to various police agencies and do some training and stuff like that. Most agencies have those rules in place. Most agencies have those rules in place that look, if you witness an officer do something illegal, your job is A, if you're in the position to stop it, stop it. But you will definitely tell a supervisor. And if you don't, there are consequences for that. The issue become, and I'm gonna tell you, that's in pretty much almost every department's general orders or standard operating procedures. The question becomes, who's enforcing it? You know what I mean? And I think that's the issue. So those rules are there. The issue is, how do we ensure that those things that are in your laws, in your SOPs, in your general orders are being enforced?
Right,
And then
guys.
how do you criminalize it? You said you took that a little bit further. How do you criminalize it? So that's going to be the thing.
We have about 5 minutes left. So, I mean, both of you guys made some excellent points. So I need for you to summarize, what a good reform would look like to you. And Ricardo, Ricardo, you mentioned that before, what people actually need to do. You mentioned it before. I want you to say it again to support this movement so it doesn't fizzle out.
Yeah. Well, again, people who know me, I am a humanitarian. I hate violence. I hate crimes. I hate fights. Most of my friends are, white. I'm not. My godmother's white. The person who named me, she's white from Lakeland. I want this to know that the fact that I'm talking this way, I'm talking about the humanitarian me personally. But I love everybody, and you go to my Facebook, you see it's crazy. But if we the people, I'm talking about white, black, Hispanics, all of us in the rainbow, we do not step in now. We don't keep the pressure as it is going now. Stay on the street the best we can peacefully, of course. And for those of us who cannot go on the street, to pick up your phone, give your senator. If you're in Florida, call Marco Rubio, call Rick Scott, okay? Call your Congresswoman Castor. Call these people and let them know what it means for you that they fix the humanitarian crisis in this country and that you need their vote. You need this to be a bipartisan issue, because killing people should be a bipartisan issue. You have to frame it this way. You cannot frame it as it's a GOP thing or it's a Democrat thing. We need to win the hearts, and only the people, and politicians only care about who's going to vote for them. If you, the constituent, they know how you think. They know it's in your mind, especially for my white friends. They know now. You vote for them, but you want them to take this issue. Trust me, they will take it because they want you to vote for them again.
Let me give the last final minute to Officer Richard. Is community policing the closest thing to what you were talking about? I mean, I know it's not as simple as that, but because I've heard this being touted by politicians, mayors, and particularly mayors.
Well, I mean, I think I think uh, I like the push. I like the national push. I like what the enthusiasm that everyone currently have to effect changes. But police departments have to take a look from within, and again have those chiefs, those sheriffs, uh, stand boldly and tell the troops that we will make changes. Because I mean, look, the status quo is easy for police departments. Keep things the way they are, no changes. We don't have to get out of our comfort zone to do things any different. Uh, but chiefs and sheriffs have to do that. They have to make people do stuff that they maybe don't want to do or uncomfortable to do. And yes, community policing should be the model for every police department because it means you have to make an attempt to understand and learn the community that you work within. Because if you don't, you're just a stranger coming in, and there's no vesting for you to do what you need to do. You know what I mean?
Okay.
I mean, one of the bad things I know we're out of time is you've got people who come in, work, they make a paycheck, and then they leave that neighborhood and go 50 miles away to spend the money that they make here, not giving crap about the community that they're working in. And I think that's what community policing does. If even if you live away, we're still gonna want you to get out the car when you are in that sector that you're working, because we're gonna want you to make those contacts and know the people who live there as human
Gentlemen,
beings.
gentlemen, that was excellent. Thank you. Thank you for your input and your wisdom in addressing this. Certainly, people will get out of this. Obviously, police brutality is not just one bad apple, it's a series of policies and procedures that are systemic and rooted in the criminal justice system of this country. So it's going to be obviously very difficult to just remove. So we have to put the pressure, as Attorney Ricardo says, put the pressure, call our representative, our senators, because that's the only way any change gonna happen. But in the meantime, I hope my listeners here, really, you guys get something out of it.